What is up, my fellow Chibits? Today, I'm here to bring all of you a Tokyo Ghoul re-discussion video. Now, as you can see by the title, today I'm here to talk about the cover of Tokyo Ghoul Re Volume 5. This is the official cover of Tokyo Ghoul. Now, obviously, this is an old cover. Most of you have probably already seen this cover once before, but the reason why I'm wanting to talk about it is because it's very relevant to the events that are now happening in Tokyo Ghoul, the latest chapters of Tokyo Ghoul Re. So, I've already kind of talked about this briefly on Twitter, and the reason why I'm making a video on it is because when it comes to Twitter, there's a character limit, so I can't actually type as much as I want to kind of explain it, and I don't want to spam fuck everybody with like multiple messages to get my point across. So, here's the point of the video. As you can see by the cover, this shows Kaneki and Eto. This is Eto here, and this is Kaneki. And at this time, in this point in the series, this is when Eto and Kaneki had their little fight, and then Kaneki, you know, he was actually going through a lot of development and change, to where he was now trying to, you know, figure out what he needs to do with his life. You know, does he need to take the mantle of the One-Eyed King, or does he need to just die and just dwindle or whatever? You know, learn to protect himself before he can protect others. I've talked about that a lot in the past. And this was, you know, the cover that kind of symbolized what Eto is to Kaneki, and how, you know, Eto has shaped the series for so long, and how Kaneki will now take the reins and become, you know, the One-Eyed King in, you know, future chapters down the road. And this was the first volume to actually reveal Talking Kagune, which was this exact volume. The chapters in this volume, this is the actual first time we saw Talking Kagune, which is very important to the series right now. What we've seen, even Kaneki himself used this actual Talking Kagune to kind of trick Arima in a future fight. This was the first volume to introduce this, and this really changed what we thought about Kagune. But that wasn't the first thing that was actually also introduced. It was also the first time we found out about the imagination shaping Kagune. A Kagune's size is determined by the quality and quantity of your RC cells, and a Kagune's shape is determined by your creativity and intelligence. So, what this means is that depending on how your quality of RC cells are, the quantity, but also your imagination / intelligence, determines what your Kagune actually looks like / Kakuja, which explains why Eto's Kakuja looks like it does, talking and all that. But also this explains why many different Kagune could take different shapes, or why there's different forms of Kakuja, because, you know, how Kaneki, you know, he had like a centipede type Kakuja, it was kind of symbolizing what Kaneki felt about himself. I've talked about this in the past in, you know, previous videos, so I'm not going to get too much into that, but it lets us know the mindset of the individual of how, like, certain Kagune look, and why they look like that is because of how the user of that Kagune, how they probably view themselves or how they view the world. And this was a very key important information we got from Tokyo Ghoul, that Kagune is determined by imagination, and Eto herself said this in this exact same volume, alongside of seeing a talking Kagune, and possibility of a sentient Kagune. Now let me get into this. So as we know, Noro was a big character in question once this volume popped up. Noro was very close to Eto. Noro barely spoke, but Noro constantly seemed like there was just something off about him. And throughout the course of Tokyo Ghoul Re, when the Shirazu fight happened, we saw some very interesting things from Noro that just didn't seem normal for a regular ghoul. Here's the image in question what I'm talking about. As you can see here, this was Noro, when he was cut in half and all that. You see the upper half of Noro right here, and then you see the lower half of Noro. He literally becomes a big massive Kagune, which looks very similar to Eto's in this other picture. Let me show you here. It looks very similar to the way the teeth design is. As you can see here, there's a very big similarity between the design of Eto's Kagune and Noro's. And what we saw from Noro was completely unlike anything we've ever seen. He had such crazy high regenerative abilities that it literally surpassed anything we knew from the series. This man was completely cut in half, and his lower half was attacking while he was on the ground. We saw him get his head completely chopped off and it reattached. We've seen multiple times where he reattaches limbs, which was just completely ridiculous, and we haven't seen it that fast from other ghouls. So there was something definitely off with Noro. And many came to speculation, myself included, that maybe Noro somehow was attached to Eto, and he was a detachable Kagune. And the reason why we came to this conclusion is because Eto could make a talking Kagune, or at the very least something that had some form of intelligence, which raised the question what RC cells were. As we know, RC cells are red child cells, that's the full name of them, and also the cells look like a fetus. That's exactly what the RC cells look like, which in the latest chapters, as we know, thanks to what Donato has been doing, it really adds a lot more to what maybe a sentient Kagune could possibly be, or a detachable Kagune, because maybe RC cells could be, in some way, a way to actually clone others. And what I'm getting at is the way this actual cover looks. This is the main point of the video. So, if you look at this cover real quickly, you see Kaneki here, and you see Eto right behind him. Now, I want you to look at the color scheme of this cover. First glance, it's very red. It's a typical Tokyo Ghoul looking cover. It's red and all that. You know, Ishida constantly uses red and black. And in this case, let's actually take a look at the position of Eto and Kaneki. Eto is right behind him, and if you look closely right here where my mouse is, you see some form of Kagune-like structure popping out, the same color, and the way the effects of this does look like a Kagune. Now, you're probably wondering, whoa, Chibi, it's just probably an art, a design that Ishida's going with. Let me show you examples of why I say this looks very similar to a Kagune. This is an official illustration by Ishida himself in the illustration book, and this is how he drew Toka. Look at Toka's Kagune and how the style of that looks, with the lines and everything inside of it. This is official by Ishida himself. And now look at this background. It looks very similar to a Kagune from what we see from other characters like Toka, which I just showed you. And as we know, imagination is key to the shape of your Kagune. Now, what I'm getting at is, in this exact same volume, Eto herself revealed that your imagination determines the shape. And it's funny, on the cover, we see Kaneki, and right behind him we see Eto, but it looks like Eto is forming out of a Kagune. You can see the way her face is coming out of like a Kagune. You see it to where, the actual red looks like it. Many have speculated that this could be bandages. Like, many say this could be Eto's bandages, wrapping around Kaneki and stuff, which that is a very likely possibility. But we gotta once again factor this in. Kagune is determined by imagination. Maybe Kaneki was imagining, the bandages of Eto, and here you go. But I feel like there is a message here that Ishida's trying to say that, as we know in this volume, or in actually a couple chapters after this volume, Kaneki and Eto have a fight. And at the end of that fight, Eto just laughs and all that, and she just, leaves the battlefield, and Kaneki eats Eto's Kakuja, and he takes a part of Eto's Kakuja within himself, and he gains something from it. Even Eto states when she's actually taking a bath that, oh, I hope you enjoyed the little gift I gave you. And after that, we saw Kaneki having a very similar Kagune like Eto was able to speak, which we saw, Kaneki demonstrate up against Arima himself. So when we look at all of this, Kaneki took on traits from Eto. He got some of her Kakuja and Kagune, and it's very similar. Another point I do want to actually talk about is the possibility of cloning. As we know, now thanks to Donato, it's proven now, Donato could literally remove his finger to make a clone of himself. And this would mean that if you can do something like that, and you can make a perfect clone of yourself that could speak and everything and you control, that would mean that others might be able to do that. Now, right now, this ain't completely confirmed. The only other person we know of that could possibly do something similar to this would be Eto, because we know that Noro has to be attached to Eto in some way, because let's look at also when Noro got his head chopped off. This is what Noro's head looked like. This is exactly what Noro looked like when his head was completely chopped off at the end of the fight with Shirazu and Urei and all them. This is what it looked like. It looks like a decaying face. And I want to actually show a page from the wiki of Noro and what it states right here. So here's the past of Noro on the wiki. You can go to it yourself. It's, Tokyo Ghoul Wiki, and then Noro. Okay, so let me read it. Many years before this series, Norio was a ghoul living in the 24th ward. He was contacted by Kuzan. Kuzan is Yoshimura, Eto's father, FYI, who was fleeing from the organization V and entrusted with raising the infant one-eyed ghoul Eto. The exact circumstances and method that led to his transformation into Noro are unclear. However, Eto placed the blame for his fate on V, claiming they took him from her. Now, why would Eto say something like that? Obviously, I would assume when she says took him from her, he died, and so Eto used her imagination to recreate Noro in the best she could remember, and that's why he might be a possible detachable Kagune, and why he was very different from a normal ghoul. When Eto said took him from her, I feel like she recreated him, and I don't say that is exactly Noro anymore. That's probably someone else, which is Eto's Kagune, and as we know, it seemed like Noro had some form of time limit. He constantly had clocks and stuff all around him throughout every time he was fighting, or it just played a big part of his character. So when you think about it, it seems very likely that maybe Eto created Noro through her imagination. And once again, we have to remember that Eto is a book writer too, so she would definitely have a very high intelligence level, and also she could have a very great imagination. To be a writer, you would have to have a great imagination, so to be able to make someone like Noro, it probably would be child's play. So it probably isn't only Donato that can make a clone, it might be something else. Now, going back to, the images here, I also want to show this too. This right here is another example of how this background looks very similar to a Kagune. This is Sasuke's, Kagune, or, Kaneki, when he was, breaking and all that, and he snaps his fingers, as you can see on the bottom there. You see his Kagune popping out of his back, right there. You see the shape of it and all that. It probably doesn't look that good quality because I'm zoomed in a little bit. But, yeah, as you can see here, it looks very different from the normal form of a Kagune. Ashita does a little bit of an artistic style here, as you can see, and it looks almost very similar to this back right here, as you can see, the style. So I feel like what's going on here is that Ashido is hinting at the possibility of maybe sentient Kagune / cloning of other characters, because as we know, we did see Rize clones in the latest chapter of Tokyo Ghoul. So that is a possibility. And once again, I want to go back to RC cells. RC cells are in the shape of fetuses. RC cells can reform anything in the, the ghoul body. They can make hands, they can make, organs and stuff like that. They reform everything. So as someone said in the comments a couple of weeks back, they're like an extreme form of stem cells. That's kind of what you can get from, RC cells. And since they have like a fetus-like shape and all that, when you go down to how they look, maybe it's, RC cells could make another person, or in this case, make a clone of a person. So who's to say that we might not see Eto in some form in the future coming back thanks to the imagination of Kaneki? Now, that's just my point here. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm just, looking into the cover and all that, the way it looks and stuff. And it reminds me of some of the things we're seeing from the latest chapters of Tokyo Ghoul. Now, I might be reaching. That is a possibility. However, I just wanted to talk about it because it was something that interested me, and it was something that is very relevant to the latest chapters. So, yeah, tell me your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel about this video? How do you feel about the possibility of Ashita hinting at, cloning what Donato did with how he made a detachable Kagune, and the possibility of maybe seeing some form of Eto through the imagination of Kaneki in the future? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.